Tighten up.
Yep.
I'm Dave Palumbo, founder of Species Nutrition. From my earliest bodybuilding days, I believed in only putting the best in my body. And that lives on in the Species Nutrition line of products. I put my name and reputation on every bottle of Species Nutrition products. If you want to be your absolute best, join the evolution.
Hey guys, we're super excited to be here at the LA Fit Expo. It's our third year in a row. And what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be launching the Tasty Pastry. It's a low-carb Pop-Tart. It's got 3 to 4 grams of net carbs. And we love this show. This is our best place to be in LA.
RX Television on rxmuscle.com. This is Ask Dave, better known as hashtag Ask Dave. You know the deal. Your 30-minute question and answer show with Dave Palumbo. Whatever's in your mind, bodybuilding, non-bodybuilding, it is all on the table. We have a lot to get to, a lot of questions. We're going to dive right into them. The first 2 questions on this show, of course, from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. First question, Dave, what drugs do you think are 100% needed to compete at the top professional level?
You know, I would say obviously a base of testosterone. If we're going to talk about, you know, anabolic steroids, definitely testosterone. You know, I've said this before on this show many times. I said that you could probably compete with testosterone, trenbolone, and growth hormone and nothing else. And you probably look just as good or almost as good as if you used a bunch of other supplements. So I would say those supplements. Now, if trenbolone is something that's just too strong for you and you have a lot of side effects from it, I mean, you could probably use testosterone and equipoise, you know, or testosterone and Decker and look just as good as if you use Tren, Masteron, you know, Winstrol, Anavar, all these other drugs. You know, it's a matter of, you know, building muscle and maintaining muscle while you're dieting. So GH, testosterone, and another anabolic is what is the magic formula right there. The other stuff is just going to make things a little easier. Maybe it might give you a little tweak here and there, but by and far, those are the drugs that are the most important, I would say.
Second question, again, from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. Why do you think we have seen, I mean, again, we do get this question time to time. Unfortunately, we have seen a rash of deaths in the bodybuilding industry over the course of the last couple of years. It's a very broad question. And I know you've addressed it on many times, but the question is, why do you think we have seen so many deaths in bodybuilding over the last couple of years?
Yeah. You know, and I said this last week, I think you asked me this question. I don't know. You know, I just don't know. And I don't believe that people are taking drugs that are much different than what we took 10, 15, 20 years ago. I think it's the other it's environmental situations, you know, whether it be being exposed to weird viruses like we've been exposed to, or weird vaccines, or, you know, or just not necessarily, for me to speculate is really just not fair to people, because you know what? I've seen people dying of different things recently, and not everyone is dropping dead of a heart attack or vascular issues. So there's been suicides because of the situation that we're in environmentally. People are depressed. They can't go out of their house. Maybe they're losing their businesses because of the whole COVID thing, or maybe they're just depressed about the state of the world right now. So there's a lot going on, and to pinpoint it on one particular thing is just not it's not validated at this point. I will say this though. If you are bodybuilding and you're worried that you're going to die because you're bodybuilding and you're using, bodybuilding drugs, and maybe you weigh 250 pounds, just go for your routine health checks. We've said this a million times. I've said it a million times. Just make sure you're checking your blood pressure regularly at your house. Check your blood sugars. Go for your cardiac scans, your cardiac CT scan, your echocardiogram. Get your blood work done every 6 months. Make sure your kidneys are working fine. Your liver is working fine. Your thyroid gland. Just check these things. This way, you're not caught by surprise. And one day you have a heart attack, or one day you have a stroke, or one day you just don't wake up. ignorance is no excuse. So I think if more people checked, and I'm talking even if you're in your 20s now, you should be checking, because there's other variables that's going on, because like the viruses that we're getting and these vaccines that we're getting that could cause potential problems. If you're identifying those problems ahead of time, then you know how to combat them. If you're not even aware that you have any issues, that's when tragedy strikes. So do I know why? I think it's a host of factors going on at the same time that are causing these deaths.
Let's go to our Instagram questions. Again, if you're not already following us, the handle is official_RX Muscle. If you're watching us for the first time here on YouTube, we welcome you. We ask that you subscribe below, hit the notification bell. Not going to miss any of our shows, segments, or updates. Of course, we are now live Sunday nights with Heavy Muscle Radio, Dave, Chris Aceto, and then, of course, we have a recurring cast, with Lee Priest, with John Romano, with special guests. And then, of course, we are now live almost entirely for after hours. Tuesday, generally around 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So again, if you subscribe, hit the notification bell, you're not going to miss any of these shows, segments, or any of our live segments. If you like what you're watching, hit the like button, comment below, and as always, we appreciate all of your support. Let's go to SQT1000. If I'm donating blood due to high hematocrit, is it better to donate whole blood or double red, which I was told extracts the amount of red blood cells equivalent to 3 whole blood donations?
No, I would just give a pint of blood. You don't want to be, first of all, I'm not even big into the whole blood donation thing, because when you give blood, your body senses it's losing blood. What does it do? It tells the bone marrow, make more blood. So sometimes you can actually give blood, and then a month or two later, you actually have more blood than you did before you gave the blood. So unless you're super crazy high and you're having side effects from that super crazy high red blood cell count, I wouldn't donate blood. But if you're going to donate, 1 pint is fine. Don't start overdoing, because let's face it, more red blood cells, better oxygen carrying capacity in the body, better ability to work out harder and longer. So by donating blood, you're actually compromising your performance. Why do you think these cyclists put blood dope and put blood into them and take EPO to raise their red blood cell count? Because they cycle better and they can train harder. So there is an advantage to having elevated red blood cells, as long as they're not through the roof.
Second question, again, from our Instagram feed. Difference from Hardcore Dan, difference between olive oil. That's my 3 or 4 year old is coming to the studio. Difference between olive oil and your macadamia nut oil, health-wise, benefits, biggest key fundamental differences.
When I was actually doing a lot of research back in the day, my good friend Ron Norman actually is the one who introduced me to he's like, have you ever tried macadamia nut oil? And I'm like, no. And he's like, sent me some literature on it, and I looked it up, and I'm like, holy mackerel. And when I tried it, I loved the taste of it so much, because it's got a very buttery, matter of fact, I put it on my kids' corn on the cob, and in their rice. They think it's butter. They have no idea that it's mac oil, because it tastes like butter. And it has actually more monounsaturated fats than olive oil does, which is, supposed to be the gold standard. And monounsaturated fats are what's good for your heart. They burn real well for energy and fuel. And macadamia nut oil has a balance of omega-3s to 6 ratio of 1:1. No oil has that. Olive oil is much higher in omega-6s than it is in omega-3s. So it's not balanced, and that's what makes it unstable. So olive oil is very sensitive to light. It can oxidize. It doesn't have a good shelf life. It can't be exposed to any light whatsoever. That's why it's always in a dark bottle. And you can't cook with olive oil because it burns. It has a slow smoke point, which is the burning point. So if you think you're sauteing with olive oil, but you're actually destroying the olive oil's health benefits by doing that. Whereas macadamia nut oil has a very high smoke point. It's 425 degrees. You can cook with it. And it doesn't matter if it's exposed to light. Even oxygen doesn't oxidize it, because it's very high in vitamin E as well. Olive oil, if you expose it to the air that we breathe, it will oxidize as well. So there's so many more health benefits of mac oil, and it tastes better, and you can cook with it. So when I realized that, I said, you know what? There's not enough of it on the market. It's very hard to find. And that's when I started doing my research, and I created my own brand from Species Nutrition. And we use a South African macadamia nut oil, which they have much better soil there than Australia does, and much better soil for certain than Hawaii does, which is where the other two sources of macadamia nut oil come from, because the soil is just richer there. So you get a much better taste from the South African macadamia nut oil. We put it in a glass bottle, unlike some other companies out there. I'm not going to name names who put it in plastic. You never buy oil in a plastic bottle because it leaches the plastics into the actual oil itself. You could put water in a plastic bottle because water is plastics are oil soluble. They're not water soluble. So, but you never put oil in a plastic bottle. So we only use glass bottles. So once you try a bottle, you'll never stop using it. It's that good. And that's how I got hooked on it. And that's why I started making it, because I was that impressed with it.
We have a lot of good questions on the docket right now. As far as off season, this is a question from B Winery. Do you have your competitors continue to do some sort of cardio during the off season, or will this hinder muscle growth? And if you do you have a general guideline?
If the person is a fatty and they get fat in the off season, I have them do cardio. If they have a crazy freaky metabolism, I don't have them do cardio. But sometimes the guys with the freaky metabolisms just can't eat enough food. So sometimes I'll actually give them some cardio to do. We're talking 20 minutes a couple times a week. And you know what? It actually picks up their appetite and they're able to eat more. They'll actually grow and start gaining weight from doing cardio, which is weird. I know it sounds weird, but if you can eat more and pick your metabolism up a little bit, you'll start growing better. But by and far, the only people I do give cardio to are people that tend to get a lot of body fat in their body. Because let's face it, when you grow, you have to feed people more food than they would be eating when they diet. You can't diet all year round. So if that's going to result in more muscle growth, but it's also going to result in too much fat accumulation, then I will give them cardio. And so it really depends on the person that I'm working with. But like I said, sometimes, I know it sounds crazy, you get a person with a really fast metabolism and I'm still giving them some cardio to do, and it works. So there's no rules, that are written in stone. It's kind of like each person is its own individual entity.
Now, I mean, there could be a lot of different explanations for this question. It's from Toe Trick. I'm really struggling with fatigue and exhaustion. It's affecting my energy levels so much so that I'm skipping meals, missing workouts. I mean, there could be a lot, but he's asking specifically, could this be down to just low test levels? Would B12 shots help in this scenario?
When people ask me these questions, I'm amazed that, they don't go for blood work at first. Because what President's calling, Chris Cito, blood work will tell you a number of things. Number one, it'll tell you what your testosterone level is, what your estrogen level is, what your DHT level is. It'll tell you if your thyroid is functioning properly, assuming you get the right test done, right? You'll see if there's any blood imbalances that are going on. So before you start knee-jerk trying to treat things that might not even have anything wrong with them, go get blood work. See what you're missing. If you're missing B12, maybe you need a B12 shot. Just to address B12 is a very unusual absorption route in the body. But you know what? We found that by giving supplements of methyl B12 or methylcobalamin, it's called. It's a methylated form of B12. It's much more absorbable and it allows your body to store it in the liver. So my B Mineralized formula from Species Nutrition uses a methylated B12. And that's why the reason we do that. So the methyl B12 is actually better than the B12 shot, believe it or not, because if you don't methylate B12 in your body, because not everyone does. I have poor methylation of B12 when I got my DNA tested. I could take all the B12 shots I want, and my body just still can't store it. So I have all this extra B12 that I don't really need. By taking the methyl B12, my body can store it better. So, sometimes you have to educate yourself a little bit on these things, but the number one thing you got to do first before you start, guessing at what's wrong with you is go get blood work. It's the simplest solution. Can't hear you, Sid.
Yeah, I had to make sure because my 4-year-old keeps coming in and out of the studio.
Okay,
so,
no problem.
So Joel asks, is it okay to take humalog insulin with almost every meal in relatively small doses, 4 IU per shot, or does that have bad health effects?
There's no bad health effects of doing that because it's kind of, you're taking the burden off your pancreas. But let me tell you something that I've discovered. And I've confirmed this with my insulin guru, Colette. If you eat a meal that has 60 grams of carbs, for instance, and you take 4 units of humalog, which covers 40 grams of carbs, you probably assume that your body is going to produce enough insulin, okay, to take up the slack on what you didn't take enough. In other words, you took a 4-unit shot, my body will produce the insulin to take care of the rest of the meal. That's not the case. It seems like when you take an exogenous source of insulin, okay, it shuts down your natural production for the meal only, not the whole day. So your body senses insulin, it doesn't release anything, but yet your 4 units is not enough to cover the 60 grams of carbs you ate. And then you might start noticing 2 hours after a meal that your blood sugars are a little high. And you're like, what the hell? They weren't high before I took this stuff. What's going on? Well, you didn't take enough. So if you're going to take a humalog shot, you better take enough to cover the carbohydrates that you're eating in that meal, which sometimes becomes a pain in the neck because now you have to figure out things perfectly. Otherwise you kind of screw things up a little bit. And it doesn't happen to everyone, but I've noticed it with enough people that you got to make sure you take enough. So the question is it worth taking, a fast acting insulin like that, with each meal, or is it more of a pain in the neck? It's like you're almost making yourself into a type 1 diabetic. Now, that's not going to shut your own insulin production down permanently. It's just you have to start calculating things much more precisely. I a lot of times like to use humulin R because humulin R doesn't release everything at once. It releases half of it up front and then the other half in 2 hours. So that kind of picks up the slack in case your body didn't produce enough or in case you didn't take enough to cover your meal. So if you, let's say you eat 50 grams of carbs at meal 1 and 50 grams of carbs at meal 2, and you take 10 units of humulin R or Novulin R, which is available at Walmart without a prescription for $25, the 5 units that's released initially will cover the first 50 grams. And then for the second meal, you got another 50 grams covered with the second shot. So even if you ate a little too much at the first meal, the second part of that shot will cover that. So once again, I think it's a safer way to go, but if you're going to go with a very fast acting like a humalog or a novolog, you got to make sure you take the right amount.
Let's go to Don Simmons. What is Glyco HD glucose disposal agent? Does it work? Is it worth my money?
How I tell you guys sometimes, if I don't know the answer to something, I tell you I don't know the answer because I don't like to make shit up and I don't lie. And I really don't know the product. I haven't looked at it. Like I said, Sid reads me these questions. I don't research the questions before I do this show. So I got to go back. I'd have to look at it. I don't know if it works or not.
We'll take another one. Let's go to Rachel Palmer Figure. So good one here. From what you know now, what would you do differently in terms of your approach to competing if you were competing today?
Good question. Hindsight is always right. 2020. I probably would not have tried. In other words, once I got really big, I probably wouldn't have kept pushing to get bigger, if that makes sense, because I just kept saying, I can get bigger. I can get bigger. I can get bigger. And I think at some point I stopped that mentality but I think I went too far with it. For my frame, I think I had almost too much muscle on it, and maybe it affected my midsection too much. So it detracted. So I had a lot of muscle. I didn't have fat on me, obviously, but I was like too hypermuscular around the midsection, and it kind of took away from my taper a little bit. I probably would have used the fiber supplement a lot earlier on and worked on abdominal control more. No one really talked about that stuff back in the 90s. We just wanted to get huge, and so that's what we did. And I did a very good job of doing that. Also, I would definitely be keeping track of blood sugars, blood pressure more. I would be going for more blood work, which I was, no one really encouraged back then. So there definitely would be things that I would have done different. I don't know, if the end result would have been any different, but look, at the time you respond the way you feel that is the best way to respond. If maybe I wasn't as extreme at what I did, and maybe I wouldn't have looked as good. I don't know. So I think probably things turned out the way it's supposed to turn out. And I have to just be okay with that. So, but I definitely would have checked my markers more. Blood sugar, 100%. I would have been on top of that a lot more. I was guessing. I was taking humulin R because it was available at the pharmacy without a prescription. I didn't know what I was doing. I was experimenting. It was working, but I really didn't have any precise measurement of what my blood sugars really were because no one had glucometers back then. Only diabetics had them. They were really expensive and you couldn't get them without a prescription. So that's one thing I definitely would have been on top of a little more.
Ivan, bodybuilding, your thoughts on taking sleeping medications in the final weeks of prep when you can't sleep from hunger, tren, excitement, etc.?
Yeah, a lot of people really like, I know Lee Priest is big on it too, like my Somalize nighttime sleep product, 3 pills before bed. And GABA and melatonin really do. GABA relaxes you, helps you fall asleep. Melatonin keeps you in a deeper sleep, works really well, except usually the last 2 to 3 weeks before a show because you're starving to death. And like they said, the trenbolone is agitating you and it's really hard to turn your brain off. And so a lot of times, a lot of guys will use a little bit of like a benzodiazepine, maybe a little Xanax or Valium or what's the word? I can't even remember. It's a shorter acting one, but I used to break off small little chips of like diazepam, which is Valium. I mean, the tiniest little pieces and it would just relax me enough and I would fall asleep because I really didn't need any help falling asleep. I needed to take that edge, that anxiety edge, which was probably being caused by the Parabolin or the Trenbolone I was taking. Maybe some clenbuterol was causing that. Although when I would take a clenbuterol, I would fall asleep. I could fall asleep 10 minutes after taking one. But I think it was more the Trenbolone that makes it hard and the hunger for sure. When I would take a little piece of and I would only do it the last 2 weeks, a little piece of diazepam at night, I would sleep really well for the night. The problem with those benzodiazepines is they're very addictive. So it's very easy to get addicted to them. So as soon as my competition was over, I stopped them. That was it because I knew better. Some people start taking them during the day to relax. And then before you know it, you're a Xanax head or you're a Valium head and, you can't get off the stuff. So if you're going to use them, just to fall asleep when you really need them, that's fine. But otherwise, I would stay away from them on a regular basis. Use the Somalize, much more natural. We know melatonin is really good for your whole body. Matter of fact, we even give the kids melatonin. They have a kids melatonin, low dose melatonin. It really helps them stay asleep better, fall asleep at night. So I wish as a kid, because I had a lot of trouble falling asleep when I was a kid, because I was wound up, when I was especially as a teenager. I wished it was melatonin because I really needed that. I had trouble turning my brain off because I would study late at night and then I would try to go to sleep after, and it was really hard. So I can relate to that.
Nico Cantemir with a couple of prep-related questions. First question, is it necessary to have a peak week, carb deload, carb load, etc.? You always say that if things are okay, don't change anything, no kooky things. And then I guess he goes on to ask, during a peak week, would you remove the Clen and T3 before carb loading?
No, you can't remove because you'll crash. You can't take Clen and T3 out. I keep the T3 in there. The Clen I'll cut back the last 2 days, maybe to 20 micrograms twice a day, because sometimes the clenbuterol can make it hard to carb up because it increases glucagon production, which is a carbohydrate mobilizing hormone. It does the opposite of insulin. Insulin stores carbs, glucagon mobilizes them. So we want the carbs stored in the muscle. So lower your clenbuterol to twice a day, 20 micrograms, and like I said, you don't do anything kooky the last week, but if you're shredded, you want to make sure those muscles now are filled with glycogen because the muscles can hold them. And the glycogen is not going to blur your muscularity at all. If anything, it's going to make things pop more when you're super lean. So I do believe in carbing up the last 2 to 3 days, depending on who the person is, how much muscle they have, how well they carb. And I do believe in a little bit of a diuretic if necessary. But I don't alter sodium or water intake at all, except the last day before. And I might cut I don't even cut sodium anymore. I might cut water like at 8:30 the night before and give the person a good 12-hour dry out overnight, to really harden up over the course of whenever they're going to sleep and waking up in the morning.
TJ Angeletta, is dieting for a second time harder than the first? And how would you go about losing weight after rebounding from said diet? So we do often get questions about, the time in between doing 2 shows. In your experience and then your athlete's experience, that uptick in the challenge, I guess, of dieting again for a second show. And I guess you want to break it up as far as, time between shows. Some will do shows in close proximity. Then you could have one, months down the road.
Super easy. I love shows week to week because you're only really training another 4 days, and then you're back on you're carving up again. So I do a show Saturday, have a cheat meal Saturday night. Sunday morning, I get up, I go to the gym, do my last leg workout, do my cardio, whatever I got to do, deplete out all that water and some carbs. Same thing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, my last workout with weights and cardio. If I'm having fast metabolism like I did, I would start carbing up after my last workout on Wednesday. I would eat Thursday and Friday. I would carb up, and then Saturday morning, do the show. It was like a repeat of exactly the week before that. And your body will do really well because when you go back onto the diet and cardio and lower your carbs on that Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you're going to deplete out everything from the weekend. Whatever you ate, drank, whatever is going to be gone in a couple days, and then you're just repeating the process again. I did that in 94 for 3 shows in a row. I did Metropolitan Championships, which I won the heavyweight class. I did the Suburban Championships, which Derek Whitsitt was there and beat me in the heavyweight class. There was no super heavyweight at the time. And then the following week at the Junior USA, Derek won the overall, and I was third. I think that was my first national show. So I was like super psyched. That was in Chicago. So 3 weeks in a row, terrific results, and it was super easy to do, I felt.
All right, so help me with the pronunciation. Is it sibutramine?
Sibutramine, yeah.
And then there's fentarmine. Fentarmine or fentarmine?
Fentarmine, yeah.
Fentarmine, yeah. So the question from Ivan Benny, and that's, I guess, usage of fentarmine and sibutramine in the last weeks of prep. Yeah.
I don't like fentarmine. They're appetite suppressants, essentially. I don't like it. I think it's, first of all, there are some cardiac side effects of those drugs. I don't really like anything that just suppresses appetite because it just doesn't, bad things happen. Okay. First of all, people get hooked on them, number one, especially women. I don't know any men who take those drugs. But if you can't eat also, I know people who take them and they get appetite suppression so much that they miss meals during the day. And that's not good either because then you could lose muscle. So don't take shortcuts. Okay. There's only a couple drugs that I really don't like. I don't like appetite suppressants like that, like those. I'm not talking about natural appetite suppressants. Like, those are fine. But I'm talking about like polypharmacy or pharmaceutical, appetite suppressants like that. Not good for your body. Okay. They do raise cortisol levels too, a lot. I don't like DNP, which you guys know is super, very, very toxic and very dangerous, and a lot of people could die from that. So those are the 2 things that I'm really not too keen on during contest prep.
Let's go to Bilal Hamide. Recently, I found it really difficult to train after coming from a long day of work, thinking about doing first thing in the morning, say around 5 a.m. Your suggestions for nutrition if I were to train after waking up directly, other than a carb protein shake?
Yeah, I wouldn't eat food. If you're going to go that early in the morning, like if I was going to go train that early, matter of fact, when I go to the gym now, we go pretty early. We drop the kids off for school. We go to the gym and get it over with. I eat a protein. I eat one of these Power Crunch bars. They have a Power Crunch high protein bar. It's like 20 grams of protein, like 10 grams of carbs or something like that. Because I'm not a big carb eater. You guys know that. And that holds me over in the workout. So at least I have some nutrition in my body. But a lot of times, most of the times, if I'm getting up, sometimes we'll get up really early and I can't even stomach anything solid. I'll just gulp down a shake. I'll put 50 grams of Isolyze, with a scoop of Carbolize into a blender, and I'll just guzzle it. I'll just mix it in 4 ounces of water, really. A lot of times I do that, to be honest with you. And I just swig it down and go to the gym. Because I don't want to go to the gym and do weight training with no protein in my system. You know what I mean? Because that's a recipe to lose muscle. But at the same time, I want something that's going to digest really quickly because I'm going right to the gym. If I have an hour, or so, and I just don't feel like eating eggs, I'll have a protein bar. But I'm not competing. If I was competing, I would probably have some eggs and something to eat, like grits or something like that was like really easily digestible. If I only have 15, 20 minutes, I definitely would do a shake. That's how I do it. Because otherwise, it's just you're going to have food laying in your stomach, and it's not going to even be digested when you're training.
Take 2-3 more questions. McCormick Masonry. Now, when we talked about cardio earlier in the show, The question is specifically, and I don't know if there's a realistic answer to this, best cardio for heart health that won't tap into your recovery abilities. I'll take it a step further because we often do talk about stair climber, right? And, is stair climber a good idea heading into a show when you've often talked about the muscle eating property of stair climber? So one would be heart health that won't tap into your recovery abilities, but then cardio that won't tap into the muscle eating mechanisms.
Well, if you're dieting for a show, you shouldn't be worried about working your heart at this point, okay? Because the most important thing at this point is preservation of muscle, right? And just looking lean. No one cares if you can run a marathon, or if you can swim 25 laps in the pool, when you get on a bodybuilding stage. So you got to kind of separate. If you're in the off season and you want to work your heart a little bit, you want me to give you a tip? Go squat. Do 6 sets of squats. You tell me you're not working your heart. You'll be ready to die. Or do bent over rows or deadlifts for 4 or 5 sets, on back day. I promise you will be huffing and puffing. That works your heart. It's fast, explosive movements, and you don't have to get on a Stairmaster to do that. So people don't understand. You're working your heart when you're weight training, unless you're doing all machines and you kind of chit-chatting with people on the phone the whole time and you're really not exerting yourself. But if you're exerting yourself with basic movements, bench press and shoulder presses and bent rows and deadlifts and squats and leg press, these are high intensity movements that require, that your heart pump more blood to your body. So, I never really worried about that. My heart was always in good shape, so I don't know what people really think that when they say, "Oh, I want to work my heart with cardio." I mean, why? Because you want to be in cardiovascular shape so you can do what? Are you playing soccer? Are you doing? In other words, get in shape for what you're doing, for the sport that you're doing. If you are doing something that requires, a cardiovascular, training, which would be like fighting, if you're a fighter or something like that, then do it. But if you're a bodybuilder and you want to be the best bodybuilder that you can be, that's really not of prime importance. You're not going to knock it. In other words, by doing 25 minutes of Stairmaster, that's not going to prevent you from getting coronary artery disease if you eat shitty food and you have bad cholesterol levels and you have a genetic predisposition for it. So it's a misnomer. They tell people to do cardiovascular training for your heart because these people do nothing. So you get these people to come into the doctor, they get a heart scan, and they, like, you guys, oh, you got cardiovascular disease, you got blockages in your arteries, you have bad cholesterol levels, your body fat levels are too high. Go do some cardiovascular training for your heart, because they're doing nothing. They're doing nothing. But I guarantee you, when I was 315 pounds, true story, and I've told this before, so I'm not going senile. I went for a stress test, one of those treadmill stress tests where they hook you up to all the things, and you walk on they start you on this treadmill walking, and then it gets faster and faster and faster until you can't go anymore. And I hadn't done cardio in years, maybe just right before a show, but I was big, off-season, heavy. And I was walking, and I was going fine. And then all of a sudden the machine is going too fast. Now I'm running on the machine. And every time I'm landing on this treadmill, the whole thing is like shaking, because I'm big. I'm over 300 pounds, and I didn't want to run, but I wasn't stopping, So for me to be able to run at 315 pounds, and I've been on the treadmill now for 20 minutes, because it constantly builds up. He told me to stop because he was afraid I was going to break his $30,000 machine. He's like, obviously you're in good shape. So the fact that I was able to do that was because I did squat, I did deadlift, I did do high output activities that worked my heart, and was enabled my heart to respond to high intensity exercise. So there's really no reason to do this stuff for your heart. The only time bodybuilders do cardio is to burn body fat, and you don't need to do high intensity to do that. You do lower intensity to do that so that you don't lose muscle.
Backup 98, thoughts on taking Dianabol sublingual to prevent appetite loss?
You could suck on that Dianabol tab all day if you want until it dissolves. You're still swallowing 90% of it. Okay, only 10% is probably getting absorbed sublingually into the blood vessel supply there. So you're not saving anything. You're just putting a disgusting taste in your mouth for 20 minutes while you're trying to get this thing to dissolve. So save yourself a lot of trouble. Just swallow the pill.
Take one more from PMC Dow Fitness. How do Olympic athletes get away with doping despite tests improving every few months?
It's not easy. It's not easy. As Victor Conte told me once before, they dodge and run, So in other words, you could miss 3 drug tests. I'm holding up 4 fingers. You can miss 3 drug tests in Olympic testing. So they randomly test you throughout the year. So they know where you live. You have a registered address. And what a lot of these athletes do is in the off season, when they're training at a competition, they don't live home. Okay. They're never home. They live someplace else. A lot of the cyclists go to the mountains and train. Track athletes will go to facilities and stay outside in hotels, stuff like that. So they can't find these people. So they come and they want to drug test Usain Bolt. He's not even it's not even at his house. So that's counted as one missed test, but it's not a big deal. Okay, well, we'll get you next time. Okay, so now 6 months passes. He's been taking steroids. He's been training. He's got all his strength. Now it's competition season's coming along. Now they go off the drugs because they don't need the drugs during the off. They already built the strength. They built the red blood cells up. They got the endurance, okay, and they got the effects of the training from the stuff. And now they come test them, and they're clean, okay? So they pass the test, okay? No big deal. They do this all the time. They dodge the drug tests. They know when these guys are coming. They get tipped off, and they're just not around. And once again, you can miss 3 tests every year, so that's easy. The cyclists that do the Tour de France, where they get tested every single day, from what I understand, what they do is they get off the bike, for the day's ride. They drug test them. After they're drug tested, they go back to their hotel room or wherever they're living, their bungalow. They slap a testosterone patch on. They wear it all night to sleep, okay? In the morning when they get up to go cycle again for the day, for the next stage of the tour, they take the patch off. They got all the benefits of the rest and recuperation over the course of the night. They have nice testosterone level in their bloodstream. They cycle for 6 hours or whatever the thing is. By the time they get off the bike, there's no testosterone left in their system to detect anymore. And they do this every single day, and they loop it around. And most of them now, they can't use EPO because they test for it, but they'll blood dope. They'll take their blood out. They refrigerate it. They put it back into their body so they have more red blood cells. There's a million ways to beat these drug tests. The problem is when, the reason Lance Armstrong got caught is because he kicked the one guy off his team, wouldn't let the guy on, Floyd Landis, and he blew the whistle on the whole thing because he knew all the people on Lance Armstrong's team knew the whole protocol of how they beat all the tests and everything. So once he told the feds everything, they knew Lance had no chance of beating it. Lance should have done this. He should have let him on the team, or he should never have made the comeback. But it is very hard nowadays because there is more technology, there is better testing and detection. You just have to be you have to stay one step ahead of the testers. That's the key.
We did get one more about now that Nick Walker parting ways with Hostile. Is it true that Jason Genova stepping in to chase a pro card to qualify at next Ruby Classic under Fouad's brand? We do not have that information. We could reach out to Fouad directly, and perhaps we'll have a response by the next episode. That is going to do for this episode of Ask Dave. Reminder right now on the channel, all new episodes of After Hours, Heavy Muscle Radio, and then, of course, tomorrow, all new episode of Iron Rage with Lee Priest. For Dave Palumbo, I'm Sadiq Faruqi. We'll see you next time.
Take it easy.